The knock came at a time when our house was usually quiet, too quiet for surprises. I remember standing at the kitchen sink, my hands submerged in lukewarm water, staring at a hairline crack in the plate I was washing. It was one of those ordinary moments that feel so small you don't bother to remember them until later, when you wish you could go back and warn yourself. The knock was firm, not rushed, not gentle either. 3 taps, a pause, then 3 more. I dried my hands on the dish towel and felt that odd tightening in my chest, the one that doesn't hurt exactly, but makes you hold your breath without realizing it. My husband, Daniel, was in the living room, the television murmuring to itself. He didn't move. "I'll get it," I called out. He said nothing. The TV volume dipped lower. When I opened the door, I wasn't met by a delivery or a neighbor. I was met by a woman about my age, maybe a little younger, with tired eyes and a stiffness in her shoulders that told me she hadn't slept well in a long time. Beside her stood a girl, tall for her age, hair pulled back too tightly, hands clasped together like she was holding something fragile inside her. "Are you Mrs. Harper?" the woman asked. I nodded. "Yes, can I help you?" She swallowed, glanced down at the girl, then back at me. "I need to speak to your husband." The girl looked straight at me. Her eyes were Daniel's eyes. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was how my heart began to pound, slow and heavy, like something knocking from the inside. Daniel appeared behind me then. I didn't hear his footsteps, but I felt him. His breath caught. I knew that sound. I'd heard it once before, years ago, when his father died and he couldn't bring himself to say the words out loud. "Daniel," the woman said quietly. The color drained from his face. I turned to him, confused. "Do you know them?" He didn't answer me. He couldn't seem to look at me at all. His eyes were fixed on the girl, who was now staring at the floor. "I think," the woman said, her voice shaking just enough to give her away, "it's time you told her." That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not broke, shifted, like the ground moving just enough to make you doubt your footing. I stepped back and opened the door wider. "You should come in." Daniel's head snapped toward me. "We can talk outside." "No," I said, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. "If this is about my husband, it's about me too." We sat in the living room, the air thick with unsaid words. The girl perched on the edge of the couch, her knees bouncing, while the woman sat rigid, hands folded in her lap. Daniel remained standing, pacing once, then stopping near the window like he might escape through it if he could. "I'm sorry," the woman began. "I never wanted to do this. I told him I wouldn't, but things have changed." I waited. I could hear the ticking of the clock above the mantel, each second loud and accusing. "My name is Rachel, and this is Lily." The girl looked up then, her gaze meeting mine again. There was fear there, and something else, hope maybe, or curiosity, the kind children have when they don't fully understand the storm they're standing in. "She's 12, Rachel continued. "Daniel is her father." The words landed softly, almost politely. They still managed to knock the air out of my lungs. I laughed once, a small, broken sound. "That's not funny." No one laughed with me. I turned to Daniel. "Tell her she's wrong." He rubbed his hands together, a nervous habit I hadn't seen in years. "I didn't plan for you to find out like this." The room tilted. I reached for the arm of the chair and sat down hard. 12 years, the number echoed in my head over and over. We'd been married 14. I thought of all the birthdays, the holidays, the quiet Sunday mornings. I thought of the nights he'd worked late, the conferences, the unexplained trips. I thought of how I trusted him, not blindly, but fully. "Why are you here?" I asked Rachel, my voice distant, like it belonged to someone else. She needs somewhere stable, Rachel said, nodding toward Lily. I'm sick. Treatment isn't working the way we hoped. Daniel promised. I promised to help, not like this. Rachel's eyes hardened. You promised to take care of her. I finally looked directly at Lily. She was biting her lip, tears threatening but not falling. She looked like a child who'd learned early how to stay quiet to survive. I'm sorry, I said to her, and meant it, though I wasn't entirely sure why yet. Daniel sank into the armchair opposite me, his shoulders collapsing inward. It was a mistake, a long time ago, before we were solid. I didn't know at first. When I found out, Rachel didn't want anything from me. I thought I was... He stopped, shook his head. I thought I was protecting you. By lying to me for 12 years? I asked. I was trying to keep our life intact. Our life. The phrase felt foreign now, like a language I'd once spoken fluently and suddenly forgot. Rachel stood. I didn't come to fight. I came because Lily deserves to know her father, and because I can't do this alone anymore. Daniel looked at me then, finally. His eyes were red, pleading. I was hoping maybe you could help, just for a while. You're good with kids. She's a good girl. The audacity of it stunned me, not anger yet, just disbelief. You expect me, I said slowly, to raise your secret child? Silence stretched between us. Lily's foot stopped bouncing. She looked up at me, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to cause trouble. That was when the anger arrived, not loud, not explosive. It settled deep in my chest, heavy and hot. I realized then that this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about choice. And I was being asked to make one that would change all our lives. Before that knock at the door, my life was not perfect, but it was steady. And when you've lived long enough, you learn to appreciate steady. Daniel and I had been married for 14 years. Not the kind of marriage people write poems about, but the kind built on routine, shared responsibilities, and quiet understanding. We knew each other's habits the way you know the layout of your own kitchen, without thinking. He liked his coffee strong and black. I liked mine with just enough cream to soften the bitterness. He folded towels neatly into rectangles. I rolled mine because it felt faster, less demanding. Our house wasn't large, but it was warm. A narrow hallway, creaky floorboards that complained when you walked across them too quickly, and a living room window that caught the afternoon sun just right. Every evening, around 6, Daniel would sit in his chair with the newspaper, glasses perched low on his nose. I'd move around the kitchen, chopping vegetables, listening to the rhythm of his breathing mixed with the hum of the refrigerator. We never had children. That was a wound we learned not to touch too often. Early in our marriage, we tried, quietly at first, then with calendars and hopeful smiles that faded month by month. Doctor visits, soft conversations that ended in silence. Eventually, the word infertility settled between us like furniture you didn't love but learned to live around. Daniel had taken it hard, I think harder than he ever admitted. He became gentler with me after that, in small ways, opening doors, checking if I'd eaten, resting his hand on my back when we crossed the street. I mistook that tenderness for honesty. I thought grief had softened him, not taught him how to hide. We filled the space children would have occupied with other things: work, volunteering, long walks on weekends, holidays spent with extended family, smiling through questions we'd answered too many times. You two still have time, they'd say. We'd nod, smile, let it pass. Daniel worked in logistics, a job that came with odd hours and occasional travel. Nothing suspicious, at least not to me. He'd call when he was running late, his voice steady, apologetic but calm. "I'll be home soon," he'd say. "Don't wait up." And I wouldn't, because trust, when it's been built slowly, feels unbreakable. I taught part-time at the community center, adult literacy classes, mostly women trying to rebuild their lives after divorce, migration, or loss. I listened more than I spoke. That was always my strength. People opened up to me easily. They told me things they hadn't told anyone else. Sometimes I wonder if that's why Daniel thought I could handle the truth, or maybe why he thought I could absorb it without breaking. On Sundays, we'd grocery shop together. He pushed the cart, I compared prices. Sometimes he'd reach for my hand in the produce aisle, squeezing gently like he was checking to make sure I was still there. I never questioned it. I never thought to. There were signs, of course. There always are. The phone calls he took outside, the way he stiffened when children cried in public places, how he avoided conversations about our future more than he used to. But life teaches you not to interrogate happiness when it shows up quietly. You learn to let good moments be good. That afternoon, the afternoon the knock came, we'd been talking about repainting the guest room. Daniel suggested blue. I said something warmer. We laughed about how neither of us would ever actually pick up a paintbrush. "I'll do it next month," he said. Next month never came. When Rachel and Lily sat in our living room, every memory rearranged itself in my mind. Conversations replayed with new meanings, absences took on shape, excuses gained weight. 12 years. That meant Lily had been born while Daniel and I were still learning how to be married, while I was lighting candles on our first anniversary cake, while I was believing him when he said he was tired from work, not distance. After Rachel left that evening, after promises were postponed and conversations deferred, Daniel and I sat alone in the house that no longer felt like ours. The sun had set. The lamp by the couch cast a dull yellow glow. Neither of us turned on the overhead light. "She's just a child," he said quietly. "I know," I said, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. "I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," I said again, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. The question felt unfair, heavy, like he was placing the weight of his choices in my hands and asking me to hold them steady. "I need time," I said. He reached for my hand. I pulled it back, not sharply, just enough to create space. That night I lay awake listening to the familiar sounds of the house, the ticking clock, the distant bark of a dog, Daniel's breathing beside me, uneven and restless. I stared at the ceiling and thought about Lily's eyes, how they searched my face for something, permission maybe, or forgiveness they didn't even know they were asking for. I thought about the word mother, how it had slipped away from me years ago, how it was now being offered back, not through love or choice, but through betrayal. Compassion or self-respect. Daniel thought they were the same thing. I wasn't so sure. The days that followed moved strangely, like time had lost its usual rhythm. Daniel went back to work as if nothing had happened. He ironed his shirts, packed his lunch, kissed my cheek before leaving. The gestures were the same, but they felt rehearsed now, like lines delivered after the meaning had drained out of them. I watched him the way you watch someone crossing thin ice, quietly, carefully, waiting for the crack. We didn't talk much. When we did, it stayed on the surface. Groceries, bills, the weather. He asked if I wanted chicken or fish for dinner. I said it didn't matter, and for once, it truly didn't. At night, I listened to him breathe and wondered how many nights he'd lain awake somewhere else, listening to a child's breathing instead. Wondered if he'd ever stood in the dark of another room and felt the weight of a secret pressing down on his chest, the way it now pressed on mine. Rachel called 2 days later. Daniel was in the shower. I let the phone ring twice before answering. "Hello?" "I'm sorry to bother you," she said quickly. I wanted to check in. Lily's been quiet since we came back." I leaned against the kitchen counter, the cool surface grounding me. "She didn't do anything wrong." "I know," Rachel said. "She's been carrying this for a long time." "So have I thought, but didn't say." Rachel hesitated. "Daniel said you might need time. I understand that, truly. I just wanted you to know this wasn't planned, showing up like that. I didn't want to ambush you." "It felt like one," I said gently. "I know," she replied. "I'm sorry." After we hung up, I sat at the table and stared at the grain of the wood, tracing the grooves with my fingertip. I tried to summon anger, sharp, clarifying anger. But what came instead was something duller, a heavy sadness that settled into my bones. That afternoon, I went into the guest room. It was the room we never quite finished. Half-painted walls, a bookshelf that held old photo albums and things we didn't know where else to put. A bed we'd bought years ago just in case. I sat on the edge of it and imagined Lily there, her backpack by the door, shoes kicked off without thinking, the quiet presence of someone learning a new place. The image made my chest ache. But with the ache came questions. Daniel said he'd helped financially over the years, that Rachel hadn't wanted to disrupt our lives, that he'd stay away to protect everyone involved. Protected. The word echoed in my mind. That evening, when Daniel came home, I asked him to sit with me. Not in the living room, at the dining table, the place where we'd signed documents, planned trips, made decisions that mattered. "Tell me everything," I said. He exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for years. "I met Rachel before you and I were married. It was brief. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. She didn't want marriage, she didn't want drama, she just wanted support. And you gave it to her," I said. "Yes. For 12 years. Yes. Did Lily ever ask about me?" He looked down. "She knows you exist." The words cut deeper than I expected. "She knows I exist," I repeated softly. "Does she know I didn't know she existed?" "No," he said. "I didn't want her to think badly of you." I let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. How generous. He reached across the table. I didn't pull away this time, but I didn't reach back either. "I thought I could keep the world separate. I never imagined Rachel getting sick. I never imagined—" "You imagined raising her," I interrupted, "without telling me." His silence was answer enough. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up and went into the living room, turning on only the lamp by the window. Outside, the street was quiet. A few porch lights glowed softly. Somewhere down the block, a television flickered behind drawn curtains. I thought about all the women who'd sat across from me at the community center, telling me their stories, about the lies they'd uncovered too late, the choices they'd been forced to make. I'd always listened, nodded, offered words of strength. Now it was my turn to live inside one of those stories. The next day, I asked Daniel for Lily's school information. "Why?" he asked. "I want to know who she is, if I'm going to be part of this, if." He gave me the name, the address. I drove alone. I didn't go inside. I parked across the street and watched as children spilled out at dismissal, their voices rising and falling like birds. Parents waited. Some waved, some scolded, some hugged their children tight like the world might steal them away if they loosened their grip. Then I saw her. Lily walked slowly, her backpack hanging low, scanning the crowd. Rachel wasn't there. Another woman approached her, an aunt maybe, and Lily smiled politely, the kind of smile children learn when they don't want to be a burden. Something inside me cracked then, just a little. She wasn't a secret anymore. She was a child navigating a life shaped by adults' decisions, by my husband's decisions. That night I told Daniel where I'd been. "You didn't tell me," he said, startled. "I didn't ask permission." He nodded, shame flickering across his face. "What are you thinking?" I looked at him, really looked. The man I loved, the man who'd lied with such care. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that this isn't just about what you did. It's about what you expect me to carry for you now." He opened his mouth, then closed it. And in that silence, I felt the shape of the next truth forming, one that would demand more from all of us, than any of us were ready to give. Rachel's health declined faster than any of us expected. It happened quietly, without drama. No emergency calls in the middle of the night, no rushed hospital scenes, just a steady weakening, like a candle burning down to its final inch. Daniel told me after work one evening, his voice careful, measured, as if he were delivering news about the weather. "She's starting a new treatment," he said. "The doctors aren't optimistic." I nodded, folding a dish towel with unnecessary precision. "And Lily, she's scared," he said, trying not to show it. Something about the way he said trying stayed with me. Children always try harder than adults give them credit for. A week later, Rachel asked if Lily could spend an afternoon with us. "Just to get used to the house," she said over the phone, "so it doesn't feel so sudden later." Later, the word hovered between us. I said yes before I could overthink it. Lily arrived with a small overnight bag, though she insisted she wouldn't stay the night. She stood in the doorway, shoulders tense, eyes darting around like she was cataloging the space for safety. Daniel hovered behind her, awkward and uncertain, a man unsure of his place in a scene he'd created. "Hi," I said softly. "You can put your bag here." She nodded and did as told, movements careful, almost apologetic. We spent the afternoon doing ordinary things. I showed her where the glasses were. She helped me peel apples for a pie. She laughed when I burned the first batch slightly, covering her mouth as if laughter itself might be too loud. At one point, she looked up at me and asked, "Did you always live here?" "Yes," I said, "for a long time." She nodded, absorbing that. "It's nice." I felt something warm and painful bloom in my chest. Later, while Lily was in the guest room looking through old books, Daniel came into the kitchen. "She likes you," he said quietly. I didn't respond. "She's always wanted a—" He stopped himself. "She's always wondered what it would be like." I turned to face him. "Did you ever wonder what it would be like for me?" His eyes fell to the floor. That evening, Lily asked if she could call me by my name instead of Mrs. Harper. "You can," I said, "or whatever feels comfortable." She smiled, relieved. When Rachel came to pick her up, Lily hugged me without warning. It was quick, tentative, but real. "Thank you," Rachel said at the door. Her face was pale, her voice thinner than before. "For being kind." I watched them leave, the car pulling away slowly, and felt the weight of inevitability settle over me. That night, Daniel tried to talk about logistics, schools, rooms, schedules. I stopped him. "Did you ever consider leaving me?" He looked startled. "No." "Even when she was born?" "No," he said firmly. "I loved you." "And yet," I said quietly, "you built a whole life that didn't include me." He reached for me, desperate now. "I was afraid." "So was I said. "Every day I didn't become a mother." The words hung between us, raw and unguarded. Weeks passed. Rachel grew weaker. Lily came over more often. She learned where things were kept, which floorboard creaked, how I took my tea. I learned things, too, that Daniel had attended school plays without me, that he'd helped with homework while I graded papers alone at night, that he'd memorized another child's milestones while ours never came. The betrayal wasn't just the secret, it was the distribution of love. One afternoon, while Lily and I worked on a puzzle, she asked, "Did my dad ever talk about me before?" The question caught me off guard. "Not to me," I said honestly. She nodded, fitting a piece into place. "Mom said it was complicated." "Yes," I said, "it was." She looked at me then, really looked. "Are you mad at me?" My throat tightened. "No, never." She seemed to relax at that, returning her focus to the puzzle. Later that night, Daniel confessed something he hadn't planned to. He always thought, he said slowly, that if you ever knew, you'd be the one to make it right. I stared at him. Make what right? Our family, he said. All of it. The realization hit me then, not all at once, but in pieces. He hadn't just hidden Lily. He'd been waiting for me to absorb the pain, waiting for me to step into the role he'd quietly reserved for me, waiting for my compassion to clean up the mess of his fear. You didn't just lie, you delegated. He opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. Rachel passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning. Lily was with us when the call came. She sat very still as Daniel spoke into the phone, nodding, whispering reassurances. When he hung up, she didn't cry. She just went to the guest room and closed the door. I stood in the hallway, listening to the muffled sounds of grief. In that moment, everything crystallized. A child who needed stability, a husband who needed absolution, and me, standing in the middle, asked to carry both. I realized then that compassion without truth becomes a cage, and I had to decide whether love meant sacrifice without consent, or whether self-respect could coexist with care. After Rachel's funeral, the house felt fuller and emptier at the same time. Lily moved in quietly, like someone afraid to disturb the air itself. She unpacked only half her clothes, leaving the rest folded in her suitcase under the bed, as if she might be asked to leave at any moment. I noticed the way she paused before sitting, before speaking, before asking for anything. Grief had taught her to be careful. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed almost relieved. Not happy, no, but lighter, as if a long, exhausting performance had finally ended and he could stop pretending. He made plans, schedules, lists. He talked about school transfers and therapy appointments and weekend routines. He spoke in we again, like that word still belonged to us. I watched him from a distance. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Daniel brought out a folder and placed it on the dining table. "I've been thinking," he said, "about legal guardianship, about making things official." I didn't open the folder. "Daniel," I said calmly, "you've been thinking for 12 years, alone." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, choosing each word carefully, "that you don't get to rush me now because your secret has run out of places to hide." He sighed, rubbing his face. "I'm not trying to rush you. I just thought—" "You thought I'd step in," I said, "the way I always do." He looked at me, really looked, and I saw confusion there, genuine confusion. He truly didn't understand why I wasn't grateful for the opportunity to fix what he'd broken. That was when I realized something painful but clarifying. Daniel had mistaken my strength for obligation. "I care about Lily," I said. "That's not the question." "Then what is?" "The question is whether I get to choose the life I'm being asked to live." He leaned back in his chair, defensive now. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying," I replied, my voice steady though my hands trembled under the table, "that if I become her guardian, it will not be because you expect it of me, and it will not happen while our marriage stays exactly the same." The silence that followed was thick and startled. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means," I said, "that I will not raise your child while pretending the lie that brought her here dismantled our marriage." His jaw tightened. "So you're punishing me?" "No," I said softly, "I'm protecting myself." The next day, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to tear anyone apart, but because clarity requires structure, and I'd lived too long inside someone else's disorder. Daniel didn't argue when I told him. He just nodded, his eyes rimmed with red. Lily noticed the shift immediately. She asked fewer questions. She watched us carefully, like a student studying a language she didn't speak yet. One afternoon, as we folded laundry together, she said quietly, "I don't want you to fight because of me." I knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes. "You're not the reason, you're the result." She frowned, not fully understanding. I brushed her hair back gently. Adults make choices, children just live with them. That night, after Lily went to bed, Daniel finally said the thing he'd been avoiding. "If you leave," he asked, "what happens to her?" I held his gaze. "That depends on what you do next." He stared at me, realization dawning slowly, painfully. "You mean you won't—" "I won't disappear, but I won't erase myself either." Over the next few weeks, we moved carefully, deliberately. Therapy sessions, legal discussions, long, exhausting conversations that stripped away comfort and forced honesty. Daniel admitted things he'd never said out loud before, that he'd been afraid I'd leave him if he knew, that he'd convinced himself silence was kindness, that he'd always believed I was stronger than the truth. "And were you?" I asked one night. He swallowed. "I don't know." "I am," I said, "but strength doesn't mean surrender." The lawyer helped us outline options, guardianship structures, financial responsibilities, boundaries. For the first time, the future wasn't assumed, it was negotiated. Lily began therapy. Slowly, she smiled more. She stopped keeping her suitcase packed. One evening, she asked if she could hang a picture on the wall of the guest room. "Of course," I said. She hesitated. "Does that mean this is really my room?" I paused, then said honestly, "It means you're safe here today." She nodded, accepting that answer more gracefully than most adults would have. Daniel and I began sleeping in separate rooms. It wasn't dramatic, no slammed doors, just an understanding that something sacred had been broken and couldn't be repaired by pretending it hadn't shattered. One morning, as I sipped my coffee and watched Lily eat breakfast, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I wasn't choosing between compassion and self-respect anymore. I was redefining what both could look like, together but not confused. And for the first time since the knock at the door, I felt something close to steady again. The truth doesn't announce itself all at once. It leaks. At first, it was small things. Daniel's sister calling more often, his mother asking questions that sounded casual but weren't, a pause on the other end of the phone when I said Lily's name, like they were rearranging a picture in their minds. Then came the invitations, a family dinner, a small gathering, words people use when they want answers without asking directly. I told Daniel I wouldn't lie for him. "I'm not asking you to," he said. But when the night came and we sat around his mother's dining table with Lily quietly eating beside me, the room filled with that familiar tension, polite smile stretched thin, eyes flicking back and forth, waiting for someone to speak first. Daniel's mother, Ruth, finally set down her fork. "So," she said, forcing a lightness into her voice, "we hear there's been a change." Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom—" "It's all right," I said gently, surprising even myself. "We can talk about it." Lily looked up at me, startled. I placed my hand over hers, just briefly. Ruth's eyes widened. "Talk about what exactly?" "About Lily, and about the fact that Daniel is her father." The silence that followed was absolute. His sister's hand flew to her mouth. His brother leaned back in his chair, disbelief etched across his face. Ruth stared at Daniel. "Is that true?" He nodded. "Yes." "And you kept this from us?" she asked. He nodded again. Her gaze shifted to me. "You knew?" "I know now. I didn't for 12 years. Something changed in the room then. Not sympathy, respect. Because the lie had a shape now, and it wasn't mine. Ruth exhaled slowly. "Why are we just finding out?" "Because Lily's mother passed away," I said quietly, "and because secrets don't survive grief." Lily squeezed my hand under the table. Questions followed, awkward ones, careless ones, some wrapped in concern, others in judgment. How could you keep that from your wife? Why didn't you tell us sooner? What does this mean for the marriage? Daniel answered what he could. I answered what I chose to. When someone asked if I was raising another woman's child, I didn't flinch. I'm helping a child whose life was shaped by decisions she didn't make, just like the rest of us. That ended that conversation. Word traveled quickly after that. Friends called, some cautiously, some bluntly, some to offer support, others to satisfy curiosity. At the community center, a woman I'd taught for years approached me after class. "I heard about your situation," she said carefully. "I just wanted to say you handled it with grace." Grace. I smiled politely, but inside I felt tired of that word. Grace often meant silence, endurance, smiling while bleeding quietly. At work, I requested a short leave. "I need some time," I told my supervisor. "Family matters." She nodded, no questions asked. Daniel, however, faced consequences he hadn't anticipated. His colleagues looked at him differently. His excuses stopped working. A few friendships cooled, not out of cruelty, but because trust, once fractured, changes the temperature of everything. One evening, he came home late and sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. "They know," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "They don't say anything, but I can feel it." I poured him a glass of water and set it in front of him. That's what accountability feels like. He looked up at me, eyes tired. "I never meant for this to hurt so many people." "I know," I said, "but meaning well doesn't undo impact." Lily adjusted too. At school, someone mentioned her new family. Another child asked where her mother was. She came home withdrawn that day, retreating into herself the way she had when she first arrived. That night, I sat with her on the edge of her bed. "You don't owe anyone explanations," I told her. "Your story belongs to you." She nodded. "I just don't want people to think you didn't want me." My heart tightened. "Listen to me carefully," I said. "What happened before you arrived here has nothing to do with your worth. Adults failed at honesty. You didn't." She looked at me for a long moment, then leaned against my shoulder. That was the first time she did that. Daniel watched from the doorway, something unreadable on his face. Later, he said, "You're good at this." I met his eyes. "I'm good at boundaries. Don't confuse that with sacrifice." Publicly, the story became simpler than the truth ever was. People like clean narratives, villains, victims, redemption arcs. But life doesn't work that way. Daniel wasn't a monster. He was a man who made a choice and then made it again every day for 12 years. Rachel wasn't a villain. She was a woman who believed survival required silence. Lily wasn't a symbol. She was a child learning how to belong. And me? I was no longer invisible. One afternoon, Ruth came by alone. She stood in the doorway, her posture stiff. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I raised him better than this, or at least I thought I did." "You raised him to avoid discomfort," I said gently. "So did many people." She nodded slowly. "What can I do?" "Be honest with Lily, with yourself. That's enough." As she left, I realized something important. The truth had changed the way others saw Daniel, but it had changed the way I saw myself even more. I wasn't the woman who absorbed pain quietly anymore. I was the woman who let the truth stand, even when it made others uncomfortable. And that, I was learning, was a kind of healing, too. There is a moment, after the noise fades, when life doesn't feel fixed, but it feels honest. That moment came for me on an ordinary morning. Lily was at the table, eating toast, her feet swinging slightly above the floor. Daniel had already left for work. The house was quiet in a way that no longer felt empty, just calm. She looked up at me and said, "Do you think people can be more than one thing?" I paused, considering the question. "What do you mean?" "My dad," she said carefully, "he did something bad, but sometimes he's good, too." I sat across from her. "Yes," I said, "people are often both. What matters is whether they take responsibility for the part that hurt others." She nodded, absorbing that. It struck me then how quickly children are forced to grow when adults fail to be brave. The separation happened slowly, not because we were indecisive, but because we were careful. Daniel moved into a small apartment not far from Lily's school, close enough to remain present, far enough to respect the space I needed to breathe again. We told Lily together, sitting at the dining table, hands folded, voices steady. "This isn't your fault," I said before she could ask. She stared at the table. "Are you leaving because of me?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "We're changing because of me." That mattered. She cried quietly, then asked if she could still come over on weekends. "Yes," I said, "if that's what we all want." It was. We established something fragile but real, shared responsibility without shared illusion. I didn't become Lily's replacement mother. I became something else, a stable adult who chose her presence instead of being assigned to it. Over time, Lily began to relax into herself. She laughed louder, left her shoes in the hallway, hung drawings on the fridge without asking. One afternoon, as we baked together, she said, "I like that you don't pretend." I smiled. "I'm too tired for pretending." She grinned. "Me too." Daniel and I continued therapy separately. He learned to sit with discomfort instead of avoiding it, to listen without defending, to accept consequences without bargaining. One evening, months later, he said something that stayed with me. He said, "I thought love meant protecting people from pain. I didn't realize it meant trusting them with the truth." I nodded. Most people learn that too late. Our divorce was finalized quietly. No courtroom drama, no accusations shouted into the air, just signatures, heavy pens, and a strange sense of release. I walked out of that building lighter, not because I'd lost nothing, but because I'd stopped carrying what was never mine to bear. Life rearranged itself. I went back to work full-time, took a class I'd been putting off, started walking in the evenings again, just as I used to, noticing the small details, the way the air cooled at dusk, the sound of distant laughter, the comfort of moving forward without a destination. Lily still came by. Sometimes she stayed overnight, sometimes she just stopped in to talk. Once, as she was leaving, she hesitated at the door. "I know you didn't choose this," she said, "but I'm glad you chose me anyway." I hugged her then, fully, without fear of what it meant. I didn't lose myself by caring. I found myself by choosing how. Daniel remained part of her life, and in a respectful, limited way, part of mine. We learned how to exist without pretending we were whole again. That was the real healing. Not forgiveness without accountability, not compassion without boundaries, but honesty that allowed everyone to grow into something more truthful. I used to think strength meant enduring quietly. Now I know it means standing clearly. It means knowing that love, when it's real, never asks you to disappear. If you've ever been asked to fix something you didn't break, if you've ever been handed responsibility without consent, if you've ever confused kindness with obligation, I want you to know this: you are allowed to care without losing yourself. You are allowed to say yes without erasing your truth. And you are allowed to walk away from lies, even when they arrive wrapped in innocence. I didn't choose the betrayal, but I chose what came next. And that choice gave me back my life. Would you have done the same? Tell me in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the quiet truths are the ones that change us the most.